This is a Heart and Hand production.
Hello everyone, it's David here with a breaking news pod, and that news is that Rangers have sacked Philippe Clement. He has been notified of this, as have the first team and the staff. We are waiting on official confirmation from Rangers. However, it has happened. He is gone. Joining me to discuss this is Cammy Bell.
Evening, David.
And Simon Halloran.
Evening, David.
Cammy, I'll start with you, and we will all say, I think, that it should have happened 2 weeks ago. It didn't. Patrick Stewart on Wednesday came out and gave the reasons for it. Europe, basically. However, yesterday's abject, and let's not dress it up, pathetic, spineless defeat against St Mirren really was an end of days thing. I tweeted last night to people, I think he knows he's done. His body language, his tone, everything was different. And it felt inevitable, and we've spoken about this before. There comes a point where one more defeat a manager is gone. I would always say to fire him before that, to at least look as though you are making a proactive decision. But yesterday had all the hallmarks of a manager waiting for the sack.
Yeah, and I wanted a response following Queen's Park, and I mean, I think I described a performance yesterday is anemic, because at least after Queen's Park you can think, okay, we can't recover that, we can't get back into the Scottish Cup, but what we can do when Celtic drop points in the early afternoon kickoff is show a response. And I think it was clear probably within the first 10 minutes of the game yesterday against St Mirren that there wasn't a drive or an enthusiasm or any kind of real form of motivation from the players. I suppose in hindsight now, I don't know why I was expecting that, because whilst I absolutely agree with the decision that Clement should have gone by now, as you rightly say, should have gone 2 weeks ago, the players also have to take some responsibility for that as well, David. Clearly, they had binned him off, and it has to happen now in order for us to be able to get to put the train back on the tracks, because we have to look towards Europe as the only thing we can play for this season. He wasn't getting a reaction out of them, and I think that the right decision's been made.
Simon?
Yeah, I think the right decisions probably came at least 3 months too late, but we can argue the points of that further down the line. But in terms of the board and the flack that will come their way and will continue to come their way at the moment. But yeah, ultimately the right decision, especially after the Queen's Park game, that was the end. That was then and there. I think we've been kind of beaten into submission with the bad defeats this season. I think, right, it's going to happen now. It's going to happen now. It never came. It's taken them this long. Ultimately, it is the right call now. How we go forward in the future in terms of bringing some, we won't be bringing someone in now. That won't be happening due to everything surrounding the club just now. Correct. So I'd imagine we'll be waiting till at least the summer under a new board makeup for that. But the results just weren't there, and we kind of knew from probably early September that the season was going to come off the rails pretty fast. And I've heard some fans saying a reason to keep him was the European games, but we've punched above our weight in Europe now for 7-8 seasons in a row. Europe takes care of itself. I'd have no complaints, even if it's like a youth coach or whatever going to come in over the next couple of months. They'll probably get a better reaction out of some of these players over that. And that's not to say that's wrong. The players have ultimately, they've down tools, some of them as well. They've got to take a hell of a lot of blame here, and there will be a lot of finger pointing to come. But yeah, I've got no doubt whatsoever that there will be a slight upturn in form. It just wasn't coming whatsoever under Clement, and he just didn't inspire any confidence towards the end.
No, he did not. And yeah, there are a lot of factors in his reign, and we'll look at this in more detail, obviously, in the shows in the upcoming days once everything is official and we know about what the interim team is. As Simon says, it is highly unlikely Rangers will make a permanent appointment right now, for the simple fact that we'll be getting a new owner who would want to do their own thing anyway, so it's mostly likely to be an interim person, and there isn't the danger of an interim person going and winning something and putting himself into the frame for the job, because obviously we can't. There are no domestic trophies available to us. And if the interim manager wins the Europa League, then by Christ, he deserves a statue, never mind the job. But the likelihood of that is slim as well. Cammy, Philippe Clement, time at Rangers, started really well. We need to remember when he came in, it was a bin fire. And he initially exerted some control. You got the new manager bounce that you often get. It's not guaranteed, but you often get it. But Rangers were doing things that we hadn't been doing. The style of football was better. The play was improved. And we got ourselves into a good position, won the League Cup. We're doing well in Europe, got ourselves to top of the league, and then collapsed. And from that collapse in March, Rangers have never recovered.
Yeah, it's not a new thing. And it's probably been this way now it certainly has been for the business part of a year. The problem where I think a lot of the fans got to, Dave, was that he kept saying, you remember the old, you'll see the best team in October, November. And when you got onto the winter fixtures, especially Boxing Day, somewhat ironically again against St Mirren, what have you, the problem was that he had no way, I don't know, I suppose for me, he had no way of being able to arrest the slide. But what I was worried about more than that was I don't know if he even acknowledged that there was a slide. So if he didn't see where there was a problem, how could he look to be able to resolve it? Because he couldn't. He's made too many changes with the team. He's taken our best striker and displaced them in order to accommodate another striker who, by and large, could leave the club tomorrow, and I don't think we'd lose any sleep over it. And Europe, I slightly disagree with what Simon was saying, purely from a punching above our weight. I think that we have performed well in Europe, but again, I think that's systematic of a group of players who, to cause and effect, I think now have they pick and choose when they want to be able to come in with performances. They've shown that they're capable of it, and I think at times what we've seen, especially from Clement, is just an unwillingness to change, and he gets a good result out the back of it, but that's dependent on the opposition. Europe is a much, much different kettle of fish to what we'll play domestically, and domestically you just couldn't crack it. And I think, you could see within the first 10, 15 minutes, as I say, that game yesterday, there was no emphasis, there was no injection of urgency due to the Celtic result. Now, no one listening to this, yourself, Simon, and I, everyone knows that the league is gone, but when you're presented with an opportunity to be able to try and take advantage, given, like I say, the exit from the Scottish Cup, given the way how the season has unfolded domestically, given the away form, then you would hope at the very least you'd look to be able to try and put a dent into that gap. But no, nothing came off the back of it. And not only is he unwilling to be able to react to that, the players aren't either. And that's just, I think, all the evidence you need in terms of the mood around the camp, where he probably felt that he just knew he wouldn't be able to get a change. And it wouldn't surprise me if at some point in the future he will come out and say, players let me down, blah, blah, my system worked. Because I still think he's too stubborn to acknowledge where his failings have been. And I don't think that will ever change with him.
Well, there is a line between self-confidence, I think, and you need it to survive in such a tough industry. Simon, I don't know how to phrase this, because I don't want to do it in a way that sounds as though I'm giving the players a pass, because I'm not. I just think that there are two separate conversations. And while we're talking about the manager, it did look like the players yesterday had given up playing for him. They weren't fighting for the manager. That doesn't give them a pass. No. Incidentally, before anyone says, shouldn't they shoulder some of the blame? They should shoulder a lot of the blame, and a lot of them should be out the door in the summer. But when it does reach that stage, there is no hope of it coming back, because once the players have down tools under a manager, lost confidence, whatever you want to call it, there's very rarely a way to find that again. Even sometimes you'll see a struggling team and they go out and they play, in England or whatever, or even in Scotland, they go out and they get beat, but they fight like hell. Yeah, that wasn't that yesterday.
No, absolutely wasn't. And the signs have really been there in terms of, I wouldn't say a player revolt as such, but players having different thoughts to what the manager's seen on the park that day. I think it was Leon Balogun a couple of months ago went against what the manager had said, Jack Butland as well. So it's been seeping in. and it's shown now in the performances as well. Yesterday, none more so than that. I don't know, the way Clement sets a team up as well is he's utterly killing the midfielders as well. That two-man midfield where they're getting overrun and bullied constantly. They're not bad players in there, Raskin and Diamandi. They boys are trying their hardest, but they're getting overrun constantly, and that makes it look as if, at times, Diamandi's not trying, this isn't happening for Raskin. And yesterday, what the passing was, well, the players poor all over the park, but he was killing a lot of our games before a ball was even kicked in matches, and players are going to be utterly disheartened seeing that and the tactical approach to each game, and it wasn't changing.
Which is not to give them a pass.
No, absolutely not. No.
Their attitude, I thought, yesterday was disgraceful. And
as I say,
a lot of them will be on their bike and deservedly so. But sticking with you, Simon, on this next question, if you like. Clement's failings, I think, a big part of it was the football was bad. It wasn't fun to watch. And if you're going to play that way, and he seemed to be okay with it or talk it up, a recent example, of course, being the game against Hearts. And I would say, well, that was a manager under pressure and relieved just to get the victory after Queen's Park. But he said things like this after a lot of games where he would say, no, we actually played well. And you're sitting saying, no, we didn't. We won, or, we had a couple of moments from whoever, Czerny or Igaman or whatever, but we didn't play well. We're not an entertaining side to watch. So if you're going to do that, then you have to win. You don't leave yourself any room. But he did have a reluctance to move away, it felt like, from his 4-2-3-1. And even when he found or stumbled into, however you want to put it, with the two strikers, it seemed he was always keen to revert back at the earliest opportunity to that system that didn't work. And there's nothing wrong with being having a lot of belief in your own system, but there is a time when it becomes a stubbornness, and I felt in Philippe Clement's case, this is a tactic that is unlikely to bring domestic success to Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many years now have we been talking about a perceived negative style, the horseshoe style, and passing it backwards at Rangers under consecutive managers now that we've had, and it's all about a change of mindset that's required from top to bottom in the club, none more so in the playing side of things. And let's hope that when we do target a new manager, it's that more attacking style that the fans can buy into. And that will give a manager more time. If he comes in and says, I want to adapt an attacking style, fans will buy into that. As far as Clement goes, he used the excuse about not having certain players available, and then you're talking about when he lucked into the two strikers thing, and then just binned it a couple of weeks after the cup final against Celtic. So I do think it was really stubborn. It wasn't set and changing his ways. Part of me thinks, did he think the players weren't up to carrying out the task if he did change the tactic longer term? That's the only excuse I can really think of for that. But no, ultimately, you look back through his press conferences that you guys have held with him as well. It was a stubbornness. It was bordering on arrogance at times for me as well. Just that he was so steadfast and looking to blame anyone but himself. That was the first time yesterday against St Mirren that he really took blame for a result on himself. Usually he's looking to point the fingers elsewhere. But yeah, ultimately, this whole negative style of football, and we've seen it yesterday when they were playing the ball around the back, just passing it here to there. The fans are sick of that style now. We've got to look forward, whether it's under the current board or under a new board in the future, to look to a sort of a progressive, attack-minded approach in terms of the football department.
Cammy, press conferences are often said to be irrelevant, but they do have an importance. I think there are too many of them, incidentally, and a lot of them could be this meeting could have been an email type things, but the truth is that Clement, I think, actively harmed himself in press conferences by consistently trying to argue that what the support was feeling was wrong. Now, that's managers, I'm sure, do feel that way, and probably do feel, with some justification, that they know better, they're professionals, they know better than supporters. But the issue comes then when you do hit a bit of trouble and a bit of turbulence. If you don't have the support along with you, and you haven't brought them along with you, you're going to be in trouble very quickly. And the thing Simon mentioned there, the insistence that what we'd watched wasn't what we'd watched, references to a new team despite the fact that it was months into it and the fans just did not want to hear this. All of these things became an issue for him, and it's about using your press conferences to establish a relationship. He never managed it. Beale never managed it. As we've mentioned before, Gio didn't say anything in press conferences. They said too much.
Yeah, it's true. And, even under the Gerrard press conferences, I remember, and listen, Stephen Gerrard's as media trained as it comes, but he would just, he'd be blunt. He would talk about things you could.
He was
very
careful. Gerrard didn't say anything he hadn't thought about before he went in, and he used the press conference to get across a point he wanted to get across. And it was almost forensic in the way that he did it.
Yeah, but then yesterday, Clement came out with, when I came here, the building was on fire. And I'm like, so I think actually it was yourself, David, that mentioned that within the press. Say, well, where do you think it is now? Like, where do you think the
exactly?
Is?
Yeah,
and there's a separation between that because, as you boys were obviously mentioning there in terms of player availability. I think for me, what you find is that there is a column where you've got legitimate reasons. I won't call them excuses, but there's legitimate reasons around the back of that. So if you look at how this season started, obviously playing at Hampden, the lack of structure above him, and he probably felt that he was minding the shop quite a bit. I actually think that the vast majority of the Rangers fan base can appreciate that. Those are legitimate. The flip side of that, and what he was, so wedded towards, was this idea of, well, things will get better. You just have to give it patience. You have to see what happens. Which is why there's probably a part of me that wonders even right now that when he got the phone call or when he had the announcement to say we're going to part company, whether or not he would have been shocked. I don't think he would have been. I think he probably would have said, well, I think you're making a mistake.
He knew yesterday. I said this actually last night. He knew. You could tell he was different. And I've seen that. Look, it was very Beale at the end where they know. And
I think he was absolutely, he was downhearted. I totally get that.
Yeah.
And he looked. That was
point, Cammy. There comes a point where you've tried everything, and you're just, I don't know how to fix this.
And I think that was the realization to him. That's when it dawned on him, and the fact that he couldn't be able to try and change it. And pretty much all of the pressers, as I say, since that slide from last March, have. They've never really been that honest in terms of where he was. But you could see with everything, the body language, the answers that he was given, there was probably a part of him that was hoping that he could still carry on. But the sentiment now is just far too gone. When you look at Ibrox being completely empty, booing, almost to a man of the people who were still in the stadium come the full-time whistle, there's no way he would have been able to see where the writing was on the wall. But I just wonder, as I say, how much he would have been willing to accept that. I assume that, with the conversations he's had with Patrick Stewart, especially after Queen's Park, that he would have been given, a very timely reminder about what has to happen. But obviously everyone still had their eyes on Europe, and maybe the manager did as well. And that's how he thought that was going to give him the opportunity to be able to buy time. But the circumstances of yesterday removed all of that, I think, in terms of any likelihood of it being able to continue.
Cammy touched on this, Simon, and it is legitimate to mention he did have a really tough hand dealt to him. There's no doubt about that the Hampden thing for a start, the downsizing of the playing squad, then, as we've found out recently, all the stuff going on about a takeover. I don't think anyone would deny, and you do need to take that into account, but you need to balance that, in my opinion, with the fact, yes, but let's look at what we were watching, the results we were seeing. I think that the fans did accept a transitional season. The reason that the fans are up in arms and wanted him fired was there's no signs of what we're transitioning to. It's all right saying we're rebuilding, but what are we building?
Yeah, there was a lack of building completely. Really, from the summer when we did downgrade in a lot of positions, that's not up for debate really. To bringing in a player out of nowhere on deadline day like Barami, who what we've seen from him so far suggests he's not going to cut it longer term. So it just seemed to be scattergun in the summer, just replacing bodies for cheaper and for proper for Goldson. That's been a downgrade, as we know, even though Connor Goldson wasn't the best form last season, but it just seemed to be no rhyme or reason to it. Coppin on the technical director side of things, he did strike lucky with a couple of signings in terms of the younger players who've done okay this season overall. They're not the ones that I put a lot to blame. There has to be a mentality shift throughout the playing staff of the club. Again, that's how many years have we been saying this now? Bread and butter is your domestic results. We can't get domestic results against the other 11 teams in the league, the other 10 teams in the league. So we need to start getting back to basics now. These players have got to realise that. It's all well and good getting your name up in lights for European games, but when a manager who, as you said, that's nearly a full year and domestically of our aggression now that we've seen really since early March all the way through to now, so a full calendar year almost, and the away results have got worse. The home performances were heading that way, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks there. So Europe has saved them just now, but the standard of football domestically was atrocious, and it was turning fans away. And if he'd have been there to the end of the season, crowds would have been way down. I mean, they already were starting to go way down.
Oh, they're down. I mean, yesterday I would estimate there was maybe 15,000 empty seats.
Yeah, it would have got worse. That's the thing. Now, if you're going to appoint an interim team, I'm assuming it's probably someone within the club, one of the younger coaches. The fans will get behind that if it's an ex-player, for example. But we don't know the makeup, as we said, but the fans will get behind people that are linked to the club, and just to see us over the line to the end of the season, because even though I don't know how many points we're ahead of Aberdeen, 14 points, I mean, there's probably going to be another couple of bumps in the road towards the end of the season where we're still going to get second. We know at first it's
we are. Look, Rangers are going to finish second.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. Yeah.
It's just about getting some sort of upturn, try and do a turn in Europe in a fortnight's time, and see what the summer brings, because that's all it is now. It's holding time now till this official takeover's announced, and then see what the grand plans are for the future. Ultimately, Philippe Clement wasn't going to be part of that. We've known that for months now. The fans have known for months he wasn't going to be part of the future going forward, takeover or not. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we turn next. But ultimately, there has to be a mindset shift in terms of mentality and the style of football and the style of manager that we want to bring in.
Cammy, final word then. What do you think his legacy will be for his 18 months in time in charge at Rangers?
I think it will be an unwillingness to change. He created an environment where players were able to operate with too much safety. There was no fear, and been able to produce an upturn in results and get them into a consistent space. And yeah, I think, like you say, he's not going to be remembered fondly because, as you mentioned earlier on, David, there was this slightly too arrogant approach towards how he was looking to speak at the fans, not to them, but at them, in terms of when he was asked the harder questions. And I think that it has went on too long. I think people will remember it in terms of he did have an opportunity. He did have barriers. Everyone understands that. But when those barriers were cleared, it didn't get better.
Yeah, for me, the key thing for any Rangers fan coming in, any Rangers manager coming in, is the supporters know what they're watching. They know Scottish football probably better than a foreign manager just coming in. You need to take them along with you. You need to get them to buy in and believe, and you do that by being honest with them and not by telling them what they've just watched isn't what they've just watched. Secondly, though, you have to play good football, attacking football, exciting football. Fans do expect that and have every right to expect it, because domestically we have a much bigger budget than anybody else, and with the exception of one team. So what happens in those games, different kettle of fish, but what happens against the rest, some of the poverty of the performances have just been too much to bear, and in the end he's paid for it with his job. Right, my thanks then to Simon.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
To Cammy.
Pleasure, mate.
And we will, of course, have lots more on this over the next 48 hours. Until we speak again, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
That was a Heart and Hand production.